Class, welcome back. In this video, we're going to start a discussion of Chapter 1. So Chapter 1 is entitled The Evolution of Law Enforcement. And really what it is it's a look at kind of a brief history of where the criminal justice system that we know and are involved in today came from, right? And we have a long history that we look at. So we go all the way back to ancient history to see, okay, what kind of laws and kind of law enforcement and criminal justice existed back in ancient civilizations, and then obviously through the ages up until where we're at now. So if you like history, this will probably get your attention and you'll enjoy it. If you're not a history person, bear with me. We'll try to get through it quick and I think hopefully point out some things that are still interesting, even if you're not a crazy huge fan of history. Kind of the first question we need to address is, what is law, right? So your textbook kind of gives a few different definitions of law. And obviously, if we were in a normal class, I'd kind of ask you, well, what is law? Where does law come from? Who gets to decide what is the law, what isn't the law, right? A quick definition for you would be that the law is a body of rules for human conduct enforced by imposing penalties for violation, right? A law wouldn't really be much of a law if there was no penalty for violating that law, right? So there has to be some kind of consequence to breaking the law for it actually to be a law. Right. And then that second point is it's made and passed by the legislative branches of our federal, state, county, and city governments. That's obviously modern, right? That's what we're dealing with now. That's where our laws come from. Here in the United States, obviously we have our government that establishes, makes, passes laws, our legislative branches of government that's their sole responsibility, right? And we have thousands and thousands of laws in our law books, in our cities, states, and in our country, of course. And then kind of this last point is that, law is based on customs, traditions, mores, and current needs. So this kind of goes back to more the historical view of what law is and where it came from, right? So you think back to ancient civilizations, small, even, tribal groups, small populations, and they had laws, right? Anthropologists, sociologists, you go back and study people groups and you see that, okay, even these primitive people groups that don't have much advancements in technology or, civilization or even language, some of them don't even have writing, right? They're just total oral cultures that don't even have a written language or anything like that, but they still have laws, right? They're not written down on a piece of paper saying, okay, this is right, this is wrong. But they still have laws that are based on their customs, they're based on their culture, their traditions, and the current need of the society. So basically, when you look at an anthropological study of human history, you can see that there's always been laws among people. That's just what we do as humanity, as people, is we have laws that are established that are based on our customs and our culture, and what we've decided as a people are necessary. And it really does come from need, right? Because apart from law, you just have complete anarchy. And if everybody just did what was right in their own eyes, so to speak, and there'd just be no order and nothing would get accomplished, right? There has to be some kind of order and structure for society itself to evolve into what we have now, which is highly complex society and culture with established rules and whatnot. So that's kind of a brief overview of what law is, right? Now, if I had time and if we could interact in kind of a live classroom, what I would want to do is I'd like to, break you up into groups and then have you talk, and I'd kind of give you this prompt and say, okay, imagine you were given a city in the middle of, let's say, Switzerland, right? And there's a city of just 500 people, and you're completely autonomous. You're not under any government. You're completely on your own. You're right, like a own private little island in the middle of somewhere, right? And you can do whatever you want. Establish your own form of government. Establish your own laws. You could do what. It's totally up to you. You and your group of people have been chosen to establish this brand new city. We'll call it a city, and you decide all the rules and all the, everything that is necessary to be an effective entity, right? And so then you decide, and I would let you guys kind of brainstorm and think. And the reality is, every time I've done this, is the groups end up coming up with pretty similar laws to what we have right now in America, right? And some of that, I think, is just because it's from familiarity, but also just of necessity, right? Kind of this mutual agreement, like, you know what, yeah, murder's wrong. Like, it's just not right to kill another person, and that's a good law that we should probably have. Stealing, taking something that doesn't belong to you, taking other people's stuff, that's probably a good law that we should have. And so you end up coming up with like a list of kind of those essential laws that we think are good or that we need to have in this city. And we end up coming up with a lot of things that are very, very similar to our current society. Now, there could definitely be some other things, some, people like, oh, we should just, abolish the police, or we should, legalize all drug use, or take away, the prison system, or all those kind of things. So those are some different ideas that have been floated out, and that's good. I want people to, think outside the box. Okay, how would this work? Could we do these things? And I always think that's an interesting discussion. Think about, okay, what would I do if I was in charge? What kind of laws would I make? What would I do? So that's always kind of a fun activity. But none of us are in that position right now. We aren't getting to choose our laws, right? We have laws chosen for us, and that's the society we live in. Now, I wanted to look at, of course, primitive and ancient law. Okay, so we kind of go all the way back to early civilizations, or at least we have, historical records of them. And some of the most, at least well put together and ancient documentation we have is, from ancient Babylonia, the ancient Middle East area. And you have this king known as Hammurabi. I might be saying his name wrong. And he had a really well documented code, right? It was kind of called the Code of Hammurabi. And it was basically, he just collected all these kind of laws and kind of customs of the people. He was a king, and he conquered. So he conquered a big area of land, right? And so he became the king of this whole area, and he collected all the laws and things, and he actually wrote them down. So he actually had, there was an advanced enough civilization where they had a form of writing and a language and things. So he wrote all these things down, and he had these lists. And so we even see, something, this famous line, an eye for an eye, right? That is found in the Code of Hammurabi, and other principles like that. So but that's, over 2,000 years BC. So right over 4,000 years ago, there was, already established, written, documented laws for society and for how people were expected to live in that society. And then if you think of ancient Israel also, about 4,000 years ago, 4,000 to 3,000 years ago, you have, what's extremely famous and well known in America is the Ten Commandments, right? Almost everybody is familiar, at least to a small degree, of the Ten Commandments, right? If you're Christian or Catholic or Jewish or have any of that background, you might be familiar with, the Ten Commandments. And if we were in class, it'd be like, how many of the Ten Commandments can you name? Can you guys name any of them? And I think, if you guys thought about it for a little bit, you guys probably come up with some of them, but right, some of the Ten Commandments would be like, don't lie, don't murder, right? Don't steal. Other ones like, don't have idols, worship God only. There's a Sabbath day one. There's an honor your father and mother. I like that one. I like to tell my kids that one. Yeah, you're supposed to honor your father and mother. Don't commit adultery. Don't covet, things like that, right? So those are kind of the 10 commandments. And then, Ten Commandments are important, especially in considering American criminal justice, because up until, a few decades ago, the Ten Commandments were pretty prominent even within our judicial system, right? There was courthouses, and you'd actually have the Ten Commandments on the wall of, United States court building or different government buildings, because people saw that, the Ten Commandments, the Bible is fairly foundational to our American system of government. And we'll see that more as we go along in this lecture. Uh, the Torah, that is the name for the first 5 books of the Bible. So the Bible's broken up into like a New Testament and Old Testament, right? So the Old Testament, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, like Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, those are the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and they're called the Torah, right? And so the Jews accept those are the Jewish books, right? Christians, Catholics, all kind of accept that as, you know, the first 5 books of their holy Bible, right? And what the Torah means, it basically means the law. And so the first 5 books, it has a lot of stories, right? But it also contains a lot of laws, and the Ten Commandments are in that part. But there's also, I believe, 692 laws written in those first 5 books of the Bible. So that's why it's called the Torah. It's known as the law, these books of the law, because it contained all these laws for ancient Israel, how they were supposed to conduct themselves, and what type of people they were to be. And the laws were real specific. Actually, on this next slide here, I pulled out some of them just because I think they're really fascinating. Because you think of, again, how old these are, right? These are 4,000 years ago. But some of them are a little crazy, and then some of them aren't that crazy, actually, after all. So looking at this, here's just a few, right? The first one, he who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death, right? Pretty straightforward, right? If it's capital punishment, right? So capital punishment, if somebody murders somebody, the consequence of that, he is guilty of death or deserving of death if he does that, right? But then you look at this one, right? If men contend with each other and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist and he does not die, but is confined to his bed, if he gets up again and walks about outside with the staff, then he who struck him shall be acquitted. You know, he shall only pay for the loss of time. He shall provide for him to be thoroughly healed. So that's an interesting idea of, a conflict, an assault type of a situation, a fight. If he doesn't die, but he just hurts him, okay, you still have to pay for his, loss of time or provide for him or help him recover, I guess. So some kind of retribution payment, but you're not going to die, or you're not going to be held accountable beyond that. And then here again is the eye for an eye. So that's in the Bible. That was also in Hammurabi's code, but eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. It's the idea of equal retribution. So the punishment should fit the crime, right? And that is not so different from our philosophy in criminal justice now. It's like there's a punishment for a crime, and the punishment should fit the crime. So it shouldn't be excessive punishment, but it also shouldn't be too light of a punishment either, right? So that's an interesting one. And then it goes beyond even just those things, right? You have this animal things. Okay, if you have an ox and you're, this farming, rural, agricultural societies, but if your ox ends up goring somebody and killing somebody, hey, it was an accident. The owner of the ox isn't guilty, right? He's not guilty. It was an accident. It happened, right? Accidents happen. But if the ox had done that before and the owner knew about it and the owner didn't keep it confined, then the owner is guilty and should be put to death, right? So that is like a crime of negligence, what we would consider negligence. Like, hey, you should have known better. This what looks like an accident, but that wasn't an accident because it could have been prevented, and this is your fault that it wasn't prevented. So kind of like a negligent homicide or type of thing like that. And then here's one that's very familiar to us as well, right? If the thief is found breaking in and he is struck so that he dies, there should be no guilt for his bloodshed, right? And that's the same law we have today here in America, right? If somebody breaks into my house and I shoot them and they die, I'm not guilty of murder in that situation because I was defending my house, I was defending my life and my family, right? And so at that point, I'm not guilty of murdering somebody who tries to break into my house and rob me, okay? And so that's, thousands of years old, there's that same principle. So a lot of the laws we have today aren't that far off from laws that have been within different societies and different cultures for thousands of years. We also have ancient Egypt with the Pharaoh, right, king of Egypt, and he appointed judges. So you had an early judicial system within ancient Egypt, again, over 3,000 years ago. And even within Egypt, there's records of public officers performing police functions. Okay, so again, almost 3,000 years ago. You have ancient Greece, and I included this quote, right? This is from, ancient Greek philosophers. They philosophized about all kinds of things, right? But a lot of it, they philosophized about justice. And Plato, right? Again, thousands of years ago, he philosophized, punishment should serve a purpose other than retaliation, right? So it's not just to retaliate against the person who did something wrong, but there should be a purpose, right? And that gets into our correction system now is, okay, do we put people in jail, or do we fine people, give them a ticket just to punish them? Or is there a rehabilitation involved? Is there some kind of form of, hey, we can not just punish the person, but we can actually reform them or rehabilitate them so that they become a better person. They don't do this type of crime or this type of activity again in the future, right? And so, Plato philosophized about that, thousands of years ago, and we're still discussing that within the criminal justice system and within educational field, right? What is the purpose of punishment, and how do we use rehabilitation and corrections to prevent crime and to make our society a safer and a better place? And then also you have ancient Rome as well. So that's some of the ancient history and kind of ancient look at law and kind of the evolution of law. And as you can see, obviously, these are thousands of years ago, but the law and society evolved and is now to what we have now. And there's a lot of similarities and a lot of things we could see, okay, well, this is where it came from. And again, like I mentioned, here in America, we have this foundation and kind of this background of Judeo-Christian principles and ideas. And so a lot of our laws and even the founding of our country was based on some of these ancient principles that are even found in the Bible and in Judeo-Christian customs and things like that. So a lot of interesting things to look at or consider if you are a history nerd or history geek and you kind of like that stuff. But again, some of the, just for our class purposes, just want you to see that criminal justice isn't a new thing, right? It's something that we've been talking about as people, as humanity, for thousands of years. And it's constantly evolving and hopefully getting better, right? That's the goal. We want our criminal justice system to get better as we become more educated and more advanced as a people and advanced as a civilization. Hopefully our criminal justice systems is advancing as well and making improvements in that sense. So it's always something that can evolve. It's always something that can improve. And again, when we talk about police reform or criminal justice reform, we're talking about, hey, we can improve things and we can make things better, more effective, and just to make society better, to make people better. And we can do that. And we can all be a part of that as well, which is, again, an awesome part of the society that we're in today, is that we all have a part through voting, through participating in our government systems. We can be a part of making our criminal justice system better and more effective. So that's it for now, and we'll talk again in a little bit.